Sierra Adams didn't mean to crash into anyone, especially not the man in the navy suit who looked like he walked out of a Forbes cover shoot, but her heel caught on the edge of the sleek marble floor. And the next thing she knew, she was face first against 6 feet of solid chest. Oh my God. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, clutching his arms to steady herself. The man didn't flinch. He caught her by the waist, holding her upright like she weighed nothing. "You all right?" His voice was low, smooth, like it belonged somewhere between a boardroom and a bedroom. Sierra blinked up at him, a little breathless. He had sharp cheekbones, piercing gray eyes, and the kind of jawline that made women forget how to form complete sentences. Yeah, I'm fine. I wasn't watching where I was going," she said quickly, taking a step back, cheeks burning. He didn't say anything for a second, just looked at her like she was a puzzle he didn't expect to like solving. Sierra coughed awkwardly and smoothed the front of her thrifted blazer. "I'm here to see Lily. She works in accounting." "Floor 23. His expression didn't change, but a flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. "Take the elevator to 23, turn left. Her office is at the end of the hall, right? Thank you." She practically ran to the elevators, heart racing not just from the fall, but from him. Whoever he was, what she didn't see was the man still standing there after the doors closed, watching her disappear with a look of intrigue he hadn't felt in a very long time. "Wait, you bumped into him." Lily's eyes were wide as she handed Sierra a coffee. "I literally bounced off his chest." "I probably left a dent." Lily burst out laughing. "That was Owen Jackson." Sierra paused mid-sip. "Who? The CEO of this entire company?" Sierra nearly dropped her cup. No way, that was the CEO?" "Yep. Billionaire, ruthless in the boardroom, and apparently now your crash dummy." Sierra groaned. "Of course, that's just my luck." Lily leaned in. "He's never down in the lobby at this hour. That's weird. I'm weird. This is clearly fate messing with me, or fate doing you a favor," Lily teased. Sierra rolled her eyes. "Please, guys like that don't even see girls like me." But Owen Jackson did. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she looked up at him, slightly panicked but totally unafraid. The way she laughed nervously and apologized like it actually mattered she bumped into him. She didn't flirt. She didn't even try to linger. She just left. He wasn't used to that, and for some reason he wanted to see her again. By the time his assistant came in with his schedule, Owen was already at his desk, typing something into his phone. "Cancel my lunch meeting," he said without looking up. "Sir, reschedule it. I'll be on floor 23. Sierra was not prepared to see him again. She had just stepped out of Lily's office when he turned the corner in a tailored charcoal suit, looking like he belonged in a movie about power and sin. "Oh," she said, backing up instinctively. He stopped in front of her. "You again?" "I swear I didn't plant myself here to run into you again." His mouth twitched, but not quite with a smile. "Good, I prefer accidental collisions," she nodded, awkward. "Okay then." Owen tilted his head. "Have lunch with me." "What? Lunch? You eat, don't you?" Yes, I just..." "Why? I want to." Sierra stared. "You don't even know my name." "Then tell me," he said. She hesitated. Sierra Adams." "Owen Jackson," he said, even though she obviously already knew, and then he turned, gesturing for her to follow. She did. Lunch wasn't in a cafeteria. It was in a private dining room on the top floor of the building, where floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the skyline, and a private chef laid out a spread that belonged in a Michelin-starred restaurant. Sierra sat across from Owen, still trying to figure out how this was real. He poured her sparkling water like it was wine. "So, Sierra Adams, what do you do when you're not crashing into strangers?" "I'm a freelance illustrator," she said, nervously picking at the edge of her napkin. "Mostly books, some magazines. I'm not rich." He raised an eyebrow. "I didn't ask if you were. I just figured, you probably only eat with people who wear $1,000 heels." His gaze flicked to her scuffed boots. "I like your shoes," she laughed. "You're lying." He didn't laugh. "I'm not." There was a beat of silence, and then he looked at her in a way that made her stomach flutter. "You're different." "Is that a good thing?" "It's rare," he said. 3 days later, he showed up at Lily's office. Sierra was there dropping off coffee, and he appeared in the doorway like he owned the world, which, technically, he kind of did. "I'm taking you to dinner." "Tonight," he nodded. "Be ready at 7, I'll send a car." She stared. "Do I get a choice?" "You always have a choice," he said, softer this time, "but I'd like to spend time with you." Sierra looked at Lily, who was already mouthing, "Say yes." So she did. At 7, a sleek black town car pulled up in front of her building. The driver opened the door and handed her a single white rose. Inside the car was a velvet box. She opened it slowly, revealing a pair of delicate diamond earrings. Her breath caught. And when she looked up, Owen was standing outside her door in a black suit, waiting. "You didn't have to do this," she said as he helped her out. "I wanted to." "Why?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "Because I haven't wanted anything this badly in a long time." Dinner was at her rooftop restaurant that overlooked the entire city, lit by candles and string lights that danced in the wind. Sierra couldn't stop smiling, neither could he. And when he walked her to her door hours later, after laughing, talking, and sharing more than she ever expected, she turned to him and whispered, "This doesn't feel real." Owen touched her cheek. "It's real to me." And then he kissed her, not like a billionaire, not like a CEO. He kissed her like a man who had just found something he never wanted to lose. When Sierra stepped into her tiny apartment the next morning, she still tasted the memory of his kiss. She barely slept. Her body was buzzing with nerves, her mind a tangle of thoughts too loud to quiet. She hadn't planned on seeing him again so soon. But by noon, a courier was at her door holding a slim white envelope sealed with her name in calligraphy. Inside was an invitation, formal, elegant, a black tie gala for the Jackson Foundation, his foundation, that night. Sierra stared at it, heart thudding against her ribs. She wasn't part of that world. She didn't even own anything close to black tie. But the envelope included a note in neat handwriting, where whatever makes you feel unstoppable. "I'll be waiting." Owen, she sat on the edge of her bed, fingers gripping the card. There was a knock at her door 10 minutes later. She opened it to find a sleek woman in a tailored jumpsuit holding a garment bag and a pair of heels that looked like they belonged behind bulletproof glass. "Miss Adams?" the woman asked. Sierra nodded, stunned. "I've been instructed to assist you in getting ready for this evening. Hair, makeup, everything is covered. Mr. Jackson said to make sure you felt invincible." Sierra barely managed to breathe. "He really said that?" The woman gave a rare smile. "He was quite firm about it." 3 hours later, Sierra didn't recognize herself in the mirror. Her hair was swept into a soft-up dough, her makeup flawless but light. The gown, midnight blue, structured like sculpture, fit like it was made for her. The shoes. She didn't even want to think about the price tag, but it was the look in her own eyes that startled her most. She looked like she belonged. And it terrified her. At 7 sharp, the same town car arrived. This time, the driver simply nodded and opened the door without a word. The ride downtown was quiet, tense. When the car pulled up to the Grand Hotel, she saw the crowd instantly paparazzi, guests in gowns and tuxedos, flashes sparking in every direction. And standing at the top of the steps, Owen. His tuxedo was cut in clean lines, his expression unreadable until his eyes landed on her. Then it changed. He descended the steps without hesitation, taking her hand and helping her out of the car like she was something precious. "You came," he said softly. "You invited me. I wasn't sure you'd say yes." She glanced at the cameras clustered not far away. "Are you?" He looked down at her. "What matters is that you're here." Inside, the hotel was transformed crystal chandeliers, string quartet, champagne towers. People turned as they entered, a few whispering to one another. Sierra leaned in. "I think they're trying to figure out who I am. They'll know soon enough," she blinked. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. Just led her toward the ballroom where a small stage had been set up. She watched as he was pulled away by a board member, leaving her with a glass of sparkling water and 100 curious eyes. A tall woman with a sharp smile approached. "You're new." "I'm Sierra," she said, trying not to sound defensive. "Interesting," the woman replied. Owen doesn't usually bring guests, especially not ones he looks at like that. Sierra didn't know how to respond. The woman didn't wait for one. She drifted away, perfume trailing behind her like smoke. Owen returned a moment later, sensing her discomfort. "Everything all right? I think I'm a curiosity," she replied. "You're not a curiosity, Sierra. You're the only real thing in this room." She tilted her head. "Is that why you brought me?" A beat passed. "No. I brought you because I wanted you beside me." Before she could say anything else, a voice called from the stage, announcing the start of the speeches. Owen's name was called. He squeezed her hand once, then stepped up into the spotlight. Sierra had never seen him like that, confident, commanding, utterly composed. He spoke about the Foundation's work in education and mental health initiatives, about community programs and scholarships. But it was the end of his speech that made her breath catch. "This year," he said, gaze scanning the crowd, "has reminded me that success means nothing without connection. That wealth is hollow without purpose. And that sometimes you don't realize what you're missing until it's standing right in front of you." His eyes landed on her. "And when it is, you don't let it go." There was a pause, then applause. Sierra's heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear. He returned to her side like nothing had happened, but she couldn't stop looking at him. "You didn't have to say that," she murmured. "I meant every word. I'm not used to being seen like that." "Then get used to it," he said, voice low. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, dancing under chandeliers, introductions to people whose names she already forgot, another kiss under the soft shadows of the terrace when no one was watching. But it wasn't until she was back in the car that she asked the question burning in the back of her mind. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because you don't want anything from me. And because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something for myself." She looked down at her hands, unsure how to hold that kind of honesty. "I'm not anyone special, Owen." He reached out, gently taking her fingers in his. "You're the only person in my life who doesn't pretend." She turned her face toward the window, suddenly afraid of how much she wanted to believe him, but deep down she already did. Sierra stood at the edge of the gallery's mezzanine, one hand wrapped around a flute of something she couldn't pronounce, and the other resting lightly on the railing. Below her, the after-party buzzed with soft jazz and low conversation. She was beginning to understand that Owen Jackson didn't just throw events, he curated experiences. But tonight, he hadn't planned anything. She had. It had started as a joke over breakfast 2 mornings ago, her teasing him that she'd love to show him what a real creative space looked like. He'd asked her to prove it. And somehow, one phone call to a friend with a struggling local art collective turned into a pop-up exhibit with Owen offering to fund the entire event. She hadn't asked him to. He hadn't asked for anything in return. She found him near a sculpture installation, deep in conversation with a man whose suit looked like it had its own security detail. Owen glanced up the moment she approached, and the shift in his attention was immediate and complete. "Everything going smoothly?" she asked, her voice low enough that only he could hear. He nodded. "People are buying, the artists are smiling, you pulled this off." She gave a shaky laugh. "I didn't even expect half of them to show." He leaned closer, his tone more intimate now. "They showed because you gave them something worth showing up for." Sierra hesitated. "This isn't your usual scene. That's the point." The man he'd been talking to cleared his throat and excused himself, clearly recognizing the shift in dynamic. Once they were alone, Owen reached into his inside jacket pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "Something that belongs to you." She unfolded it, her breath caught. It was a check, an absurd one with her name on it and a note scrawled across the bottom. "For the next exhibit, no strings attached." Her fingers tightened. "This is too much." He tilted his head slightly. "Then use it to make something bigger." "I can't owe you, you don't." Sierra looked up at him, conflicted. "Then why me? Why this?" He took a step closer, his voice even. "Because I believe in what you see. And I believe in the way you make me see things differently." Before she could respond, someone called his name from the other side of the room. She watched him go, the check trembling slightly in her hand. Later, when the crowd thinned and the jazz faded into ambient echoes, she found herself on the gallery's rooftop. The city lights blinked in the distance, and for the first time in days she could breathe. "I was hoping you'd come up here," Owen said from behind her. She didn't turn around. "It's quiet." He joined her silently, their shoulders brushing as they looked out over the skyline. "I'm not used to people doing things for me," she said softly. He glanced at her. "Maybe that's why you needed someone too," she frowned. "And you think that someone is you?" "I don't just think it, I feel it." She finally turned to face him. "You barely knew me a week ago. And now I know exactly what I want." Sierra's voice dropped. "That's dangerous." "So is pretending not to feel anything when you do." She stepped back. "You live in a world where everything can be fixed with money. I don't." He didn't flinch. "Then let me show you I'm not just money." She searched his face. "Then what are you?" His answer was immediate. "Someone who's tired of pretending that control is the same thing as peace. Someone who sees you and realizes he hasn't been living, just operating." Sierra swallowed hard. "Do you always say exactly what people want to hear?" He shook his head. "No, I say what's true." A gust of wind swept her hair across her face and he reached out, tucking it behind her ear. His touch lingered and she didn't pull away. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" "That I'll fall for you and you'll wake up one day wondering what you were thinking." He stepped in, close enough that she felt the heat of him. "Then I'll remind you every day why I wasn't thinking, I was just feeling. And for once, that's enough." Her breath caught again, but this time she didn't move. Their lips met, not with the surprise of their first kiss, but with the certainty of something that had been building beneath the surface. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his chest. "I don't know how to be part of your world." He wrapped his arms around her. "Then let's build one that's ours." She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she believed that might actually be possible. Sierra stepped off the elevator onto the top floor of the Jackson Global building, her heels muffled by the thick carpeting, the skyline glowing through endless panes of glass. She'd been invited, not summoned, not requested, but invited to Owen's office, and the simple fact that he asked rather than assumed still sat heavy in her chest. His assistant waved her through with a nod, and the moment she entered his office, she felt the change in atmosphere. The city stretched out behind him, but Owen wasn't looking at it. He was standing in front of the windows, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders stiff. She hadn't seen him since the gallery night. Not because he'd disappeared, he hadn't. He'd called, left voicemails, even sent her a book by her favorite illustrator with a note tucked inside. But she hadn't answered. Not right away. Now he turned as she entered, and the way his expression shifted, quiet relief. Then something more complicated made her stop at the threshold. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I wasn't sure I would," she admitted. He nodded once, as if he'd already prepared for that answer. "I needed time," she added. "I gave it." She stepped forward slowly, her voice softer. "That's why I'm here." He didn't move. "You said you were scared." "I didn't want to push." Sierra crossed her arms loosely. "You didn't, not really. But I needed to figure out if this is something that only feels real in your world, or if it still feels real when I'm alone in mine." And she met his eyes. "It still feels real." That cracked the tension in his posture. He walked over to her but stopped just short of touching her. "I've been fighting myself," she said. "Trying to decide if I'm brave enough to believe that someone like you could choose someone like me, not just as a rebellion or a distraction, but because you actually want to build something that lasts." "I'm not interested in distractions," he said. "You know that." "I think I do. But I need to hear it from you, without the champagne, without the view, just you." He took a breath, and when he spoke, it was different than before, not polished, not practiced. "When I was 15, I watched my father fire a man for wearing the wrong color tie to a board meeting. That was the first time I understood what power looked like in my family. It wasn't about leading, it was about control. I built this company with the one goal of never becoming him. But somewhere along the way, I started making decisions like he would have. I started measuring people by what they could offer. Sierra listened, unmoving. You're the first person who didn't ask me for anything, you didn't try to impress me, you didn't even want to see me again that first day. I was mortified, she said, lips twitching. And still, you came to that lunch. You showed up at the gala. You pulled together that exhibit. You've done more with honesty than I've done with entire teams of strategists, and it made me realize that I don't need someone to match me in status. I need someone who makes me feel human again. She stepped closer. You do realize I'm not going to fit into your world the way others might expect. I don't have the training. I don't know how to play the game. I'm not asking you to play it, he said. I'm asking you to rewrite it with me. She reached for his hand. Then I need to know one thing. Anything? If I fall for you completely, if I stop holding back, are you going to run the first time I ask for more than just the moment? His grip tightened. No. Because I'm already planning for more. I've been planning since the second you crashed into me. Her breath caught. You mean that? I've never meant anything more. She stared at him for a long moment, and then she let go of the last piece of fear she'd been clinging to. Then say it. He stepped forward, cupping her face carefully, reverently. I love you, Sierra. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what anyone else thinks. I just know I've never felt like this before, and I don't want to waste another second pretending I'm in control of it. Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't look away. I love you too. He kissed her then, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for permission or forgiveness, just held everything they'd both been afraid to say, and for once there was no audience, no spotlight, just the two of them, alone and unafraid. Later that week, Sierra stood in the middle of a sunlit studio space tucked inside a converted warehouse, paint-streaked and full of light. Owen had bought it in silence, handed her the keys with a single line. I want to give you something no one else can take away. It wasn't a gift, it was a foundation, a place to build. She didn't need him to prove his love with extravagant gestures anymore, but the truth was, he still did. Not because he was trying to impress her, but because that was who he was. And now, he had someone to do it for. The day she opened her first curated show in the space, he stood beside her in jeans and a rolled-up shirt, helping hang lights. No photographers, no press, just him. As people filled the room, Sierra caught his hand, laced her fingers with his, and whispered, I never imagined a wrong turn into an office building would change everything. He leaned down, voice rough with quiet emotion. You didn't just change everything. You became everything. And just like that, the girl who thought she didn't belong in anyone's world realized she'd built one of her own with someone who never asked her to change to fit his, only to let him grow into hers. Owen stood barefoot in Sierra's kitchen, sleeves rolled up, brow furrowed as he tried to figure out how the coffee machine worked. It was early, the kind of early when the light outside barely touched the tops of buildings, and the rest of the city still felt half asleep. Sierra leaned against the doorway, arms crossed over the oversized t-shirt she'd stolen from his closet. You look like you're trying to disarm a bomb. He glanced over his shoulder. It beeped at me twice, that can't be good. She walked over and pressed a single button. The machine sputtered and began brewing. You were overthinking it. I'm used to machines that require biometric scans. Well, this one just wants you to believe in her. He turned toward her fully, eyes soft. That's what you do, isn't it? She arched a brow. Believe in old appliances? He shook his head. Believe in things that other people give up on. She didn't answer, just stepped closer and took the mug he offered as the coffee finished. There was still a quiet between them that hadn't fully settled, not uncomfortable, just full of newness. This was the first morning they'd woken up in the same place without a gala, a meeting, or a camera waiting for them, just them. And that terrified her in a way that also thrilled her. He leaned against the counter next to her, sipping his coffee. My mother called yesterday. Sierra blinked. You didn't tell me you spoke to her. I didn't, not until now. She wanted to know who you were. I can imagine how that went. She said you looked like someone who didn't need anything from me. I told her that's exactly why I need you. Sierra stared into her cup. She doesn't approve. She doesn't understand. There's a difference. Does it matter? Owen set his mug down. Only if we let it, she met his gaze. Then we don't let it. He stepped toward her, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. There's a benefit dinner next week, Paris. I don't have to go, but if you wanted to. She bit her lip. You're asking me to go to Paris with you. I'm asking you to stand beside me, not as a guest, as my partner. She hesitated. I've never been out of the country. Then let's start with somewhere unforgettable. She looked up at him, heart pounding. Okay, let's go. He kissed her like he'd been waiting for her to say that for years. Paris was more than just a trip. It was a line in the sand. The moment they stopped wondering what they were and started living like they knew. She wore a dress she found in a tucked-away boutique in Montmartre, one Owen insisted she pick without looking at the price tag. He wore a navy tuxedo that made her forget how to breathe. But it was the way he looked at her across the ballroom that made her forget everything else. After the dinner, they snuck away from the crowd and walked along the Seine, heels in her hand, his jacket draped over her shoulders. They passed a street musician playing a slow, haunting melody on a violin. Owen stopped. Dance with me, he said. There's no one else dancing. Then we'll be the first. Under the muted glow of the Parisian street lamps, he pulled her close and they danced, slowly, thoughtfully. Like time had folded around them. Later that night, back at the hotel, she looked across the room as he undid his cufflinks. I want to ask you something, Sierra said. He looked up immediately. Anything? If I say I want to do this for real, not just the trips, not just the beautiful moments, but all of it, will you be there when it gets hard, when life is messy and not photographed perfectly? He walked over, knelt in front of her, and took her hand. That's the only version I want. The real one, with you, she exhaled slowly, heart full. Then let's stop tiptoeing around it, he tilted his head. Around what? Let's build a life together, all in. Owen stood and without a word walked to the drawer beside the bed. He pulled out a small black box her breath caught. You were carrying that for a while now. He opened it. A ring, simple, elegant, with a single sapphire in the center, framed by two tiny diamonds on either side. I didn't want to ask you until I knew I could give you every part of me, not the version that signs checks or gives press quotes. The man who wakes up and burns toast and forgets to answer emails. The man who still has nightmares about failing. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears brimming. Will you marry me, Sierra Adams? Not because I can give you the world, but because I finally understand what it means to have one, and it's you. She nodded, laughing through tears. Yes, yes, Owen, 1,000 times yes. They kissed, and it tasted like forever. A year later, the small stone chapel in the English countryside overflowed with wildflowers and soft sunlight. Sierra walked down the aisle in a dress she designed herself, hand stitched with stars along the hem. Owen waited at the altar, his expression unguarded for once, raw with emotion. They married with no cameras, no headlines, just vows spoken quietly between two people who had found something rare, something that couldn't be bought, staged, or planned. Afterward, they danced barefoot in the grass, surrounded by friends who had become family, beneath lights strung from tree to tree. At the reception, Lily clinked her glass and stood to toast. To the woman who thought she didn't belong, and the man who showed her she was never meant to blend in. You built something beautiful. Not because of where you came from, but because of who you became together. Sierra looked across the table at Owen, who raised his glass with that same look he'd given her in the elevator lobby all that time ago, like she'd surprised him in the best way. That night, as they lay tangled beneath linen sheets in the small cottage behind the chapel, Owen pulled her closer. Still scared, he whispered. She shook her head against his chest. Not anymore. You made me brave. You made me honest. They fell asleep wrapped in that truth, the kind of sleep that only comes after knowing beyond doubt that you are exactly where you're meant to be, and they never stopped choosing each other. Every day, every season, every storm and sunrise. Because love like theirs didn't need permission. It only needed yes.